now I'm just selling a completely new thing for your pod here. So it has been said here the first time.
What do you think that you have that others don't have?
I think I'm well dressed. No. And the question is, who is that responsibility on?
You are some of the superstar teachers.
But it's also about showing, if you learn this, what can you do with it? Just imagine now having a model of the whole world.
Do you think we will have a society going forward that is designed more for robots than just humans?
I think that
Hi, Dani. Very excited to have you here.
Hi, Patrick. Nice to be here.
We met, it was quite many years ago for the first time. And I think it's a little bit funny because you are a very big name within the field of AI. And when you talk about models and so on, you usually talk about machine learning models in that domain, right? But we got connected through someone who worked with another type of modeling with you at that point in time, because you've been a fashion model as well. For, among other things, this point in time, it was for a Swedish fashion brand, Rodebjer.
Yes. It was a nice opportunity to kind of like go back to doing something that I used to do when I was much younger. So when I was studying in Croatia at that point, and at the end of high school, I started modeling, like fashion modeling, And I actually had an opportunity to move to Milan, and I was offered a contract with an agency. And then I talked to my father, and then he said, like, well, you know, it's the end of the high school. Like, maybe you can do the university first and then do modeling. And little he understood about, you know, how young you needed to be at that point. It was like 90s. And then I said, okay, then I'm going to do the university first and we'll see what happens after. So, but he was right in the retrospective. So in my 40s, I went back a little bit to fashion modeling and
And now you're...
And now I'm back to regular models, machine learning models and AI models and large language models for that part and foundation models,
Well, very happy that you followed your father's advice there. Because right now you're one of the biggest names in our part of the world when it comes to both business and AI, everything that is exciting these days.
I'm trying to hide myself, but there are so many self-proclaimed experts, but I have been doing this for a really long time, I usually say.
And you're a professor at the Royal Institute of Technology, and so is your husband.
Yeah, it happens to be so. So we met while both of us were doing our PhD. In a little bit different areas. So my major is computer science and his is electrical engineering. And we'll continue to talk about this, but today we put together software and hardware in the area of AI. And you can say that I came from the maybe software part and he came maybe more from the kind of hardware part and modeling part. And we ended up to be at the same place or at the same university at the end.
Oh, nice. And he has been one of my teachers back in the days.
Oh, good.
He was very good. It was one of the first courses within AI that I took.
Oh, that's really cool. And again, we established this AI course at KTH actually together still while being postdocs, I think, at that point.
Oh, nice.
And the course grew. You know, we started like with 40 students and now we have around 500-600 on an annual basis or more than that.
I remember it was in the early days of the latest way of AI hype, you can call it that. And I remember when I took it, it was not too many people interested because nothing really worked. And then I know a few years later, you had to break it down to like, I mean, the rooms were totally...
filled with people.
Yeah, people were standing.
That was actually a dream, you know. You remember this like, or... I spent some time in US and really popular teachers, you know, at Ivy League schools. You go to these rooms, you know, and there are students everywhere they stand, they sit, they they go there for the teacher, not always for the subject. So when it started to be that way, when we had so many students, I really felt like, wow, this was a dream. I really wanted that many students to be around and listen to us.
Yeah, but you are some of the superstar teachers.
Well, not really. I think that, it's kind of like a combination of, I think, presenting a topic in a certain way so that students, independent of their background, can really understand the topic. But it's also about showing what, if you learn this, what can you do with it? So I think that you need to meet students at the right level. And that's something that me and my husband talk a lot about.
Yeah.
How to present something that is difficult in a way so that people take it as a challenge, but not as a hurdle, that they can't overcome.
Yeah. When I studied in, I call it engineering school, KTH, Royal Institute of Technology, I did bachelor's within engineering physics, but then, I took that AI course taught by your husband at that point. And I brought a bunch of classmates and we all took the machine learning masters after that.
That's cool.
So there was a group of almost 10 people and everyone blames me for ending up in the field, but I blame your husband.
Hopefully they learned something that they kind of like did not plan for. But I think that was an interesting thing because we started with AI and AI is a pretty broad field.
Yeah.
But then, as you said, we established 2 master's programs at KTH. One was more towards the software than the machine learning master and kind of like data-driven models and so on. But at the same time, we started a control and robotics master, which is more towards hardware. So there is a certain overlap, right, in terms of methodologies and so on. But it also shows what types of problems you can solve with the same or similar types of models and so on, both from the hardware world and from the software data-driven. And I think that hopefully students can understand after taking these masters, what skills they have in terms of then implementing in industry and solving really interesting problems. And you are the example. I think that you kind of like also marrying several different fields in your current work.
Yeah, but I stuck to, I kept myself towards the software side, the easier part, I would say.
But I think you still have a good understanding of what type of infrastructure, for example, you need in order to deploy certain types of models and so on. And I think that you also have that thinking in a way, what is possible and what is not possible to do when it comes to hardware too. So, at some point as an investor, you can also make smarter decisions.
Yeah. Well,
we'll see.
The more I learned about hardware, the more I kept away.
Okay.
You need the smartest...
But that was also maybe a learning.
Yeah, you need the smartest people to combine the two, right?
Well, it's not easy.
Yeah. And besides a strong kind of presence in academia, you're also having a big presence in business, right? So you sit in the boards of directors of companies such as H&M.
H&M Group,
H&M Group, the Swedish fashion giant, right? And SAAB and FAM.
So there are 3 different, as you said, it's a fashion business sector. Then we have a fighter plane or defense industry. And then the third one is a huge investment company that invests, I would say, in rather classical industrial companies such as Stora Enso and SKF, which I think, I only have those 3 and I have had them for quite some time. And I chose them, I would say, consciously. It just, because I wanted to also understand and study what are the similarities between these 3 sectors, right? And I think that these 3 sectors gave me a fantastic idea of how AI, both in terms of software and hardware, can be deployed in these different sectors. What's similar, what's different, what needs to be further developed, and so on.
I love how you say that you chose these companies because they are extremely attractive, very, a lot of people would love to take that position, right?
Yeah, again, nothing comes from just like wishing things. I mean, it's a combination of having a little bit of luck, but also, as my husband sometimes says, making your own luck in a way. And I think that if I chose other things too early, maybe I wouldn't have gotten the opportunity to choose these, right? Maybe I wouldn't have been asked because somebody would have said, oh, she has too many things going on and so on. So I think that sometimes it's also good to wait, acquire maybe knowledge you need, and then consciously go into something that you really want to do.
And when international business leaders, especially when it comes to areas within data and AI, you're always one of the go-to people in this part of the world to involve, right? So when, for example, Sundar Pichai of Google came to Sweden last year, was it?
Yeah, it was last year,
yeah.
I think, yeah.
And I mean, obviously you got to do a fireside chat with him, right?
Yeah.
That you did very well.
Thank you so much.
But what do you think makes you this special? Because you're kind of synonymous with AI in this part of the world, right? So what do you think that you have that others don't have?
I think I'm well dressed. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding. No, but I think it's a lot about being professional, honestly. Being on time, not promising, and then, not kind of like doing lots of background work in terms of how to prepare well. But I think it's also about being able to ask questions that maybe marry these different kind of like areas or disciplines. And in particular, in that interview, we were very interested in terms of not only where AI is going and what Google is doing in this sector and so on, but also what kind of capabilities or skills people will need in the future when AI is maybe doing lots of or parts of jobs that we are doing today, but also how this will affect the educational sector.
Yeah.
So, and I think that today with AI, lots of different things are basically going into each other's. It's not only that you need to know your job and your sector, you also need to understand how people act and react to certain things. You need to know what competence you need, where to find that competence, maybe how to build your ecosystem. And I think that that's something that maybe, I somehow acquired by just moving and being a part of all these different areas or sectors, and maybe that's then giving me this opportunity to also make this linkages between the what can we discuss and why is education relevant for this, or what can potentially public and private sector require or acquire from academia in the future.
What are some of the typical go-to topics in a board setting, for example, when it comes to you? Because usually different people in the boards of directors have different, areas of expertise.
Competence. And I think that there are a couple of things. I think that some companies are better, for example, in collaborating with academia than others.
Yeah.
If we compare ourselves to US, we will see that Swedish private sector is not at the level of neither having the models or having the volume in terms of this interaction with the academia, as we are seeing, for example, in US, or for that matter in some European countries, because there are also large institutes being established, and institutes are there for doing this link between the private and the academia. And I think in Sweden, we don't have all these tools. So thinking about how we can make these connections between, as I said, academia and private sector is something that I really, it's my kind of like question that I really like to push. and how this then goes down into the operations, basically. The second question that I really like to discuss is, of course, everything that has to do with technology, but not AI per se, is technology at large. If you take a company, for example, that has a complex and supply chain that goes from producing the raw material to doing like the end product, or even having a direct customer interaction, which some of the fashion companies, for example, have, we think about where in the supply chain technology can actually make difference, not in 5 years, but now, and then of course in 5 or 10 years. How can we introduce technology that is mature enough in order to make a difference, and so on. So I think that these two are what I typically very much focus on. The third one, I would say it's equally important, but it's not so maybe easy to kind of implement always. And that is about securing the competence. How does the company that maybe transforms from being a fashion company to being a tech company, how do you make sure you have the right competence? How do you make sure that all the software engineers and machine learning experts out there see your company not as something, I would need to work with fashion designers. No, you would actually need to work with a very advanced kind of, technical like stack that requires your competence and potentially transform a whole business. So these three, I think, is something that I can really contribute with, and something that I usually focus on.
Cool. That's very exciting, because in this kind of tech era that we now face and are in the middle of, we've called it war for talent for quite some time, right?
Yeah.
People are thinking about the needs to kind of recruit new people, but also upskill and train existing team members. And one way to do that is, of course, as you mentioned, the collaboration with the academic institutions, right? So it's very timely topics.
I think it is. And I think that it's not only for the companies I work with, but it's also for me as a regular professor in academia, because I think that the academia will need to transform too.
Yeah.
Right now we are, and will for quite some time still, educate people that come to us directly after high school. But for how long? We have been talking about people that need to reinvent themselves in their maybe, 50s, late 40s and so on, or even older people that want to come back and learn something new. Current academic system and framework is not built for that. It's not built for large masses of people that come and restart. Not only because they maybe don't integrate well in the, the whole kind of technical part of what they would need to use in the educational sector, but it is also because they come with lots of skills and lots of experience. So the academia also needs to think of how we use that experience and the skill of people that have maybe worked for 20, 25 years in the private sector. Now they come back to learn something new. How do we exploit what they already have?
Yeah.
So, and teaching somebody that is in their 18s, 19s, 20s, it's very different from teaching or educating somebody that is in their 50s.
Yeah, you typically have this kind of one-size-fits-all education for the younger people, and then you have the MBAs for the more experienced people. But that
costs money, and I think that somebody needs to pay for MBAs.
Yeah.
And this is not, I think, how we will have it in the future, because there will be more individuals that out of interest, out of the need, out of any X reason, will want to come back to more kind of like classical education. I'm not saying that everybody needs to come physically to my university or anything like that. I think that throughout years and due to COVID also, we have built lots of digital platforms. We also have and are seeing companies that are producing relevant educational material. And as I said, it has never been easier to educate yourself in human history. What worries me is that just because we have access to everything is not that everybody just goes and educates themselves.
No.
So there is something needed. Is that just the social context of being immersed in the environment where everybody is there with the same goal? Or is it something else? I don't know. But I think that kind of like the social aspect, we're just here to learn. We don't need to do anything else than learn, and we learn together and we can learn something from each other's. I think that that has a great value, and I think that that's not something that you can just do by sitting, in your home or in your living room and acquire kind of everything that comes in a digital format.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. One of the big values of attending university was those exam periods when everyone studied for the same exams with the same deadline, and we helped each other and encouraged each other. If you have access to a lot of content online, but it's you need to have the discipline to follow through yourself. People usually procrastinate.
Precisely, you need that discipline. You need the motivation. But I think that, as you said it, I mean, in a group, when everybody has the same type of external pressure and a rather similar type of goal, I think as a group, you can deal with stress easier if you are in the right group.
Yeah.
And I think that lots of people forget about that. So how do we deal with stress if we are together with the people that don't generate more stress for us, but that by collaborating, by being able to openly kind of say what we are afraid of and what we maybe don't completely understand, and somebody comes and help you. Right. I think that this is an easier way of actually managing through and doing the hard stuff, right? And this is what we see with companies. This is what we see in any area or in any sector when there is lots of stress, that how a well-working group is. And I think that, or performs, and I think that this is something that I hope, this is one of my kind of like, light or hopes for the future. If we are more and we know something about ourselves and each other's, it will be easier to dynamically build groups in educational scenarios, which are the groups that kind of help the individuals in the group to perform better. And I think that you always don't have a choice of that. Maybe sometimes you can choose people you work well and do projects with, and sometimes you can't, but maybe also with the help of AI, we can get to build these groups dynamically. And I think, this is again my hope, so far academia did not have a possibility of working with the age aspect, so putting together groups of different age to work on projects. I'm talking about difference of 20, 30 years here. This is what I would like to see as an experiment. How would the learning and the learning outcomes be if not everybody is the same age, which I commonly now have in my courses.
That's very interesting. So you start to have more diversity in age?
I think we will see it more and more. Right now we don't. And I think that it's good if it doesn't happen like right away, right? Because I don't think that we know how to use it in the best possible way. But what I think that when you put together people of different age, I think that we will be seeing that there is no... we don't have the same type of a comparison going on between the individuals. So maybe that will also affect that there is less stress in terms of, and that you will have maybe easier time opening yourself towards people that are not kind of like, the mainstream you.
Right. And also, I mean, one of the big benefits of being in a group when you learn something is that you can help each other out, right?
Exactly.
And it's super exciting to see these new large language models that you can ask. I wish I had access to that when I was studying.
Just
right?
yet another expert, right?
Yeah. I mean, I hope that people will not study less in groups just because they can get help online much more easily.
No, I have the same hope, actually. I really look forward of people seeing the digital kind of help as yet another group member that
Right.
can mediate, that can potentially translate. Just imagine a group where we talk about different age, where we talk about different gender, potentially somebody that just doesn't speak Swedish and they just came to Sweden and can continue to speak in their language, and you don't see the difference because there is also the translation going on, in real time basically, and mediating. Or maybe you just have different generations, and you have different slangs
Right.
that somebody doesn't understand, or the way you construct a sentence that can have different meaning to different people. So I think that large language models can actually help to mediate also the conversation in a really nice way. And that's why I look forward to the use of this type of systems, especially in the educational scenario.
Yeah, that's for sure very exciting to see how kind of one of the institutions that pioneered this kind of technology, how that will be impacted itself. Because it's not the area or the sector that is the most advanced in adopting it right now.
No, and I think that it's because it's a very regulated sector, like some other sectors. And we see that in sectors that are very regulated, the introduction of the technology always takes a little bit longer time. Now, educational sector is a very regulated sector from the perspective of how do we assess knowledge, how do we produce knowledge, how do we communicate knowledge. And now there is a new tool that potentially requires you to change all three of these.
Right.
And where you can't anymore even say whether the things you expect come from a single human are now kind of coming from models that are trained on opinions of very many people and so on. So I think it's, you need to, it's disruptive, but given that the academia is so very regulated and that we have for such a long time said what's kind of like necessary at different levels to fulfill, you now need to rethink all of that. And you maybe also need to rethink what is that a human actually needs to know,
right,
in order to be considered as an expert. Are you still the same type of expert if you don't know how to answer certain questions without asking a large language model? Because I think that everything boils down to you having the constant access to the technology or not.
Right.
So I'm thinking like you being a medical doctor and being able to cure and diagnose very many different things when you have access to the technology, but then maybe you are ending up to be somewhere in Africa or, like in Gaza right now, in places where you actually can't communicate with your LLM, right, through your phone or something like that. What are the basic skills you need in order to be able to do exactly the same work, but in a setting where you don't have access to the technology? And I think that that's what is academia fighting right now. I mean, how do we ensure that you can still do everything you are assessed on when all the kind of interaction with the technology is taken away?
I know that's a very big debate among people in universities right now, because there is this kind of, you could call it, now I'm kind of generalizing a lot, but academia generally tends to not approve of these technologies, but in work life, you used it very heavily, right?
Yeah.
And if you're training people for the workforce, then why shouldn't you allow students to train with these technologies, right?
No, I think that, of course, that it's a very polarized opinion, I would say, in academia. You have people that are on both sides of the kind of line, and then you have many in between that just don't know because they don't know.
Yeah.
And I think what is important is that our responsibility is, especially at the university level, to educate experts that can then, the day one, when they start their work in industry, that they know enough so that they can actually use the technology that is used in the companies, right? But the other part also remains, and this is that we cannot say or give somebody kind of like a stamp of being an engineer if that person doesn't have the knowledge.
Right.
So how do you make this? And I think that this is currently the problem in academia. This is just, this pooling of this like long string, and this is why people are in between. Some people do find time to reinvent their courses, the way of interacting with the technology and assessing students. And some don't, because maybe from the beginning, they were not the experts in this technology. So I think that that's very important to bear in mind, right? So that those that maybe can disrupt themselves and reinvent themselves as teachers need to have the interest, the knowledge, and still do their daily work. So it's a lot kind of for teachers to do.
I can just think about some of the early courses I took in computer science when a big part of the kind of examination of the course related to different coding assignments.
Yes.
And I mean, when ChatGPT first came, I went back and put some of these into ChatGPT, and it kind of completed them almost
exactly
working.
And I think that this is exactly as you say. So now there are a couple of steps there, right? First, you need to know what to generate. That can come from the assignment itself.
Yes.
So you need to be, even at that level, you need to be able to ask the question. So I don't think that you would have been able to ask that question if you didn't do those assignments at some point. That's the first. Where do the questions come from? Yeah. Or if you want to generate a specific sorting function or something like that, you need to know what sorting is and for what purpose. That's one. So you need to know what to ask for. The second is you need to assess the answer you get. I mean, you just don't blindly believe teachers and people anyway. They tell you something and then you think, then you put that into relation of things that you know. Yeah, this sounds... And then if you still don't understand it, you potentially ask the teacher, why do you claim that this is like that? In my opinion, it's like that. You challenge people, right?
Yep.
You should be able to challenge any type of a co-pilot. How do you do that? The third thing has to do with you as an expert being able to still do all these things when you are not having access to the co-pilot, potentially. We talked about that. Yep. But the fourth one is, if you want that co-pilot also to excel, if you want to continue to develop systems that can do more and more of that kind of like human, boring, whatever tasks, how do you do that? Who are the people doing that? How do you know what should be the next thing the co-pilot should do?
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking like I would not like us to stagnate as a race, right? Just because we have access to this. That being said, can we draw a parallel between just a regular manual tool such as a hammer? I mean, each year can buy something fancier and fancier and fancier, but it's still the hammer. With AI, it's not like that. We can't see what's kind of like the end function of this technology. And we are now talking about the technology reinventing itself. But even that technology takes the input from the world humans are immersed in, right? So I think that this is important to bear in mind. Yes, the technology can come up potentially with things we humans yet have not, because it will put things into the relation. And there you also have polarization. Certain people think that will never be the case, right? That's like quantum mechanics would have never been found out by AI. I usually say, I don't know. We just don't have a proof of that. But then we will need to understand it. We will need to understand whether if AI comes up with something new, is it relevant?
Yeah.
And for what?
I think there are at least, it relates to the discussion of can AI generate new knowledge?
Yes,
or just
exactly.
kind of regurgitate existing knowledge.
Yeah.
But a lot of innovation and new insights comes from mixing knowledge from different fields, right?
Exactly.
So within machine learning and medicine, etc., right? So just like, let's say that we cannot generate totally new knowledge, but these LLMs and other large models are trained on large amounts of data from different domains. And to just merge that knowledge together will generate new insights.
Exactly.
Right?
And I think that has always been the case. I mean, why do we kind of like strive for multidisciplinarity? Why do we talk about that? We have talked about that even before AI.
Yeah.
We wanted people from neuroscience and behavioral sciences to come together with engineers and do things that are ergonomic for people or better, or you wanted to make an interface that somebody will actually use. I, as an engineer, don't know anything about user design or, how I should even make studies that will confirm whether my finding in a way is relevant or irrelevant for people with disabilities or something like that. So I think that we just need to remind ourselves that we have always wanted to see kind of like the multidisciplinary aspect in everything. And I think that AI is just fueling that right now. It's helping us to see things, to mediate between experts from different areas, research areas or scientific areas. And it doesn't really matter, if you speak Chinese and I speak Croatian, and we have an LLM that helps us to translate as we speak. This is exactly what can happen between an engineer and a medical doctor.
Yeah.
And I just have to say, this is like almost an anecdote, right? Because I did a sommarprat. I don't know, this is summer, like what we have in Sweden. You will need to maybe explain and give a little bit of a background.
Yeah, I can give a brief background because sommarprat is like, it's one of the original podcast formats and it's a very big thing in Sweden, right? Mm-hmm. Every year during the summer months, you have some of the leading experts in different areas to do roughly 1 hour episode where they just talk about something of their interest. And it's super prestigious. And I
did it some years back.
Yeah.
But it was very interesting because one of the parts of that talk was about control theory. I explained that we need to have this control theoretic approach when we work with hardware that we want to make autonomous. And in Swedish, this is reglerteknik.
Yeah.
And then there was a friend of a friend that listened to the sommarprat. Yeah, okay. And then he is a dentist.
Oh, yeah.
And the word reglering for him is about making your teeth, straight. Yeah. He said, why is she talking about that? I mean, what does her engineering background has to do with my kind of so we use same words in different sectors that mean completely different things.
Yeah.
He was scratching his head thinking why is reglering important for her robots? I don't understand anything. And that was it's an anecdote, but we have that happening all the time. Now imagine experts from different countries, with different backgrounds, with different educations and all of that. Of course, that we need some form of mediation. And I think that this is what we are currently also seeing in LLMs, right? That can help us to build a context,
Yeah.
and how the context affects basically the quality of LLMs and things like that.
And I think one of the very important things you mentioned before was the importance of being able to challenge the outputs of those LLMs. Because when you look at larger enterprises and the adoption of LLMs for different tasks such as coding, etc. I know there are these numbers which claims that productivity goes up 50%, etc. Right?
You can confirm any
yeah
any claim with any statistics.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry.
But when you really look a bit deeper, I think a lot of people realize that if you're very junior in your job, you tend to sometimes get less output when you rely heavily on LLMs because they hallucinate, right? They do sometimes very good things, sometimes totally wrong things. And if you're not knowledgeable enough to question the output of those models, you might trust them too much, right? And you perform bad things, right? And if you're talented enough, you know, what we usually call 10x developers, 10x software engineers, you can become 50x because you know what is good, what is bad, and you can leverage that very efficiently. So I think there is this kind of hurdle you need to overcome before you gain that productivity.
And
from
the question
LLMs.
is, who is that responsibility on? Going back a little bit to education, did we assess well this person? I mean, if you say that this person is a software engineer and the only thing we taught that person was how to use Microsoft Copilot or any other Copilot for that matter, right?
Yeah.
Or did we really wanted this person kind of like to think a little bit kind of like, you know, object-oriented programming or function definition and things like that, just to understand basically what a template is and stuff like that. I think that that's important. This is still, I think, what is important for the educational sector to continue to rethink. How do you know that somebody knows? But also, how does the individual in question knows? I mean, you don't know as yourself, and somebody didn't tell you. If you just pass all the exams, you think you know.
Right.
So you will never question yourself as the individual. And I think that this is one of the problems that we are seeing, as you say, why inexperienced engineers maybe make mistakes. It's because they don't know that they don't know.
Right.
And that's the biggest problem we have. Why? Because it does not align with the current processes, how we work. That's the thing. So my point, and it doesn't work, and it's not aligned of how I would like to see the technology being used. So right now, it is very profitable for those selling the functionality to just sell you the functionality.
Right.
Because you buy, you think the productivity will go up, and everything is nice. But let's say that system, that a Copilot system has also the educational or the test aspect in it. So it gives you whatever code you want to generate twice for free. But the third time, before it gives you the answer, it assesses whether you actually learned how to do those first two that it gave you answer for the day before. You will hate it.
And the usage will go down tremendously.
Yes,
of those
and it
systems.
will cost money, but maybe at the end it will not generate the same type of errors.
Right.
So I think that this is an important thing to think about, like how do you build systems that kind of like test themselves? And we are not there yet. Nobody dares to do a thing like this because, as you say, I mean, people will potentially not use it and so on. But we will need to continue to think bigger, especially large corporations, of how they also then take the responsibility of the educational part a little bit. Because academia will not be able to do that. Companies will not be able to do that.
I hear a lot of companies now just rushing to, gain adoption. They have metrics such as how big proportion of the employees are using LLMs in some way. And then also how many, prompts are they making. But it's very crude metrics, right? It doesn't really capture anything about the quality. of the outputs?
There are different levels, I would say. I think just by measuring to what extent people are, let's say, interested in testing the technology is already something.
Right.
I mean, and if you think about those that are very optimistic and those that are very pessimistic, you actually want to have people that are optimistic, right? You want to have people that are not scared of using the technology. And I think that it's important to not only have those that are optimistic by nature to use it. You want to have people that are actually pessimistic still to use it.
So you drive that culture.
You drive the culture, you do the change, right? And that comes, as I said, in steps, or it comes, it will come differently for everybody. But it is what you do with then the information you have. What do people do with technology? How do they use it? What is that people are interested in? And I think that, again, there you will need multidisciplinary knowledge. Maybe you will need somebody from humanities and social sciences to help you to assess the data that comes from the usage and say, well, from what we can see, your employees do this. This can be based on their non-interest, or because they are that they are afraid, or potentially that they are not at a level of knowledge so that they can even do the prompts, maybe. And then, at the other end, you would have I think that your people need to go and read more classical books, or more because they just don't have the language to prompt, or they don't,
Right.
I think it's what we do with the information. And not kind of be blind and just do some mainstream metrics that everybody else is doing.
Right.
What is that is specific for our business? What is it is specific for our company? And what can we do with the data that actually brings us to the next level? Right. And I can tell you that very few people out there are, once they have the data, they just do very classical metrics. 99% of our employees are using it. Yeah, but for what?
Right.
What is it doing with them? Not only what they do with the technology, but what is the technology doing with them? How many are asking that question? Very few.
Yeah.
And I think that for me as a scientist, that's actually an interesting question. What is technology doing with your employees?
What do you think is the impact of a company that is quick to adopt these type of technologies, and what will happen to those who are late to adopt?
Of course, it always depends on the sector. And it also depends on what the adoption actually means. You can adopt technology in any sector, in any way. But have you adopted it in such a way, or implemented and deployed it so that it actually means a difference for the business?
It actually solves a business problem.
Yeah, if it actually solves a big business problem, or if it generates more problems for you.
Right.
And I think that that's an important thing. That's why I say that, well, somewhere you need to start. But then you need to work really, really hard, and probably go through a reorganization, who is doing what, in order to be able to assess, to have a group that does the same business without using the technology, and the group that does the business with the technology, and then maybe compare. And I don't think that we have this way of thinking always in large corporations, even if we potentially have the funds and the capacity of doing it, doing in-house experiments. And there are many ways of how you can do this. You can have kind of, a smaller business, like as a kernel, that you put together people from different, let's say, business units or business areas, and, things like that. But I think this is the creativity I would like to see.
Right.
And I think that goes a little bit into your kind of more education and the business aspect. How will companies reorganize, rethink, reoperationalize, I don't know, in the future with the help of the technology? And this is what I think. I mean, those that just say blind no to the technology, I think that those will definitely be disrupted. Those that do too much of the technology without really thinking, okay, how do we assess ourselves whether this is really of value, will potentially also disappear.
They become very unfocused.
Unfocused. I think that will be, it's like flying high without, coming too close to the sun, I usually say. So it's like a little bit like you need to rotate, like a washing machine, a little bit kind of like several times. Try to think, okay. And also accept that many of the tries will not give the result.
Yeah. So it's important to get started, but it is equally important to stop and reflect on what are the results.
Precisely,
and
so that you can do the next. So it's maybe the step kind of like change that I'm looking for.
And you see a lot of companies just, either not trying or just trying a lot, but that kind of reflection and like really thoughtfully steer the business based on the outcomes.
And I think that's the most difficult part.
Yeah.
Because it requires everybody to become engaged.
Yeah. And to do something they have never done before.
Excellent. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Otherwise, you will have just a couple of those that think that they know best, running very fast, and the rest will be just, what are those people doing?
And now we're talking a lot about, LLMs and so on, but AI, as you said in the beginning, is much broader than that. And we have been through some AI winters in the past. You have experienced them.
Many,
right?
Yeah. The seasons are like not equally long, but yeah.
And an AI winter, is it fair to describe? It's kind of, before an AI winter, you have a period of AI hype where there is a lot of overpromise, under-delivery.
Overpromise and overhope, maybe.
Yeah.
That the technology will give something fast.
Yeah. And then you see a lot of investments into AI, and then when you have no results, it becomes an AI winter where like
people disappear in a way.
They lose
from the
interest super hard, right? And that has happened several times in the past. We had the experts AI systems many years ago. We had I usually say we had a semi-AI winter less than a decade ago when we had the promise of deep learning, and then we ended up predicting cats and dogs, and then LLM sparked a new hype, right? But what other areas of AI do you see being applied out there? And related to that, do you think we are in an AI hype cycle where there is a winter around the corner?
Difficult question. I think that things are maybe a little bit different than they used to be because of this exponential kind of development of technology, like when different technologies are being integrated, right? So it's not only that we are here now with large language models because something tremendously different happened in terms of research or mathematics related to these. Yeah, as you said, we had deep learning models that continued to kind of like develop. Now we even have new types of networks that are kind of like coming out that are maybe more suitable for dealing and training with smaller data sets and things like that. We can talk about that for a long time. So the scientific community continues to kind of like work on better and better models.
Yeah.
But what has made the difference is the confluence of the fact that we had the data, that we had the models, that we had the infrastructure. So when those three kind of like, integrated, this is what made the boom. What would we now need to see in terms of having the next boom, and what would the next boom be? What I usually said is that, I always like to think of a human and our way of kind of like, being intellectuals and acquiring knowledge and communicating the knowledge and so on. And we do this today very much by using our visual sense, our hearing sense.
Yeah.
And this is what has been digitalized. And this is what today these large language models are also kind of like using. It's the language, it's the word, it's the written, it's the drawn, it's, And then now, for the future, I mean, of course, we have 3 other senses that we just scraped on the surface of digitalizing and things like that. But there is lots of knowledge in that. There is lots of knowledge in kind of like body language and stuff like that. Now, your question has been, are we going to potentially have again the new winter, or what can that be? You know, how would that look? Or what is then the next thing that could happen? I would say that we are still in the winter of the hardware development. And if you think back in mid-90s, when the first autonomous systems started to came out, the autonomous vacuum cleaners, at that point, everybody thought that having a humanoid robot doing all your homework is just around the corner.
Right.
And now we are like 30 years after. Have we been in, you know, like a long winter? Or I can't say that. I mean, you never have a winter like the things completely stagnate. Even when we talk about AI winters, the scientific community continued to develop things.
Right.
But then it needed something else in order to propel. That's why I'm talking about data and infrastructure. But the idea of deep learning has been around for a really, really long time. And I think that we see this in many other areas. We see this in the development of next generation of like maybe humanoid robots and so on. We know what we would like to see, and we see that there is a potential, but it requires, again, a confluence of many different things. We need light materials that are cheap. We potentially need electric or pneumatic actuation that is safe, but that can also like have a large payload and small size. You don't want to build robots that weigh like 250 kilos. You would want them to be 50 kilos, right, but still have the strength of carrying something that is 150. We don't have that. So, and we don't have systems where these systems can, independent of, you know, how the electronics is done, be deployed undersea or in the wind or in water, in oil or whatever. So there are many things we still don't have. And I wouldn't say that we are in the winter just because we can't build a humanoid robot that can do everything a human can do. Because we continue to do the science and development both in industrial setup and in academia. But we just don't have the confluence of all of this, you know, coming together so that kind of like it will happen anytime soon.
I remember one of the first kind of conversations we had, you shared with me, that was many, many years ago, right? You shared with me that you're doing research on kind of robots.
Picking up things and...
cutting bread.
Yeah, cutting bread.
I remember a cutting bread example, and you're like, robots are still having a difficult time cutting bread with different...
crust.
Different crust because different hardness and...
You need a different type of knife. You need a different type of motion. So in any skill where there is lots of variation, the skill is the same. It's cutting bread.
Yeah.
It's a single thing. How difficult can it be? And we have machines out there where you just take a loaf of bread in a store and you put it in and it will kind of like cut it. But when a human does it, it actually requires lots of knowledge. Yeah. And you need to feel it. You need to have it in your muscles. And you need to know which knife is the right. Do you want a knife that have teeth or not and stuff like that? You have to have the right force. Not everybody can even, and the right angle, not everybody can cut bread. Is it warm? Has it just been baked?
Right.
Or has it been in the fridge for 3 days?
Right.
But this is just one example of many. Thinking about putting on your clothes, buttoning a shirt where you see the buttons, or the shirt where you don't see the buttons, but you know that they should be there. Right. Small things. Those things are still very difficult from the perspective of even large language models to address. And this is because we need VLMs. We need visual language models, and we will need TLMs, tactile language models, or VTLMs. Now I'm just selling a completely new thing for your pod here, so it has been said here the first time. This is what we are going to need. We are going to need models that ground the physical world much more into in the speech, in the dialogue, what we can communicate. And just remember, even for cutting bread, we can't communicate that, oh, for this loaf, you need 5 newtons of force or 10 newtons of force.
You need more senses than just...
Yeah, I mean, humans can't communicate that. We can still kind of transfer the skill between you and me if I hold your hand and transfer the force, but I can't tell you whether it's 5 or 10 newtons. And even if I could have, what would you do with it? How do you know what's like a 10 newton exerting the force? I mean, you can think of it, but you don't know how you actually do it. So that's one thing. But the interesting thing here is that once we start to do this on physical systems, on robots that have sensors, they will be able to communicate that between themselves. They will be grounding information completely differently than we humans do. They will be transferring knowledge and skills between different robot embodiments in a completely different way than we humans can.
Right.
Will that make them more powerful? Maybe. And I think that if we are to talk about some of the things that with the development of when the hardware and software come together for real, we might be having systems that are actually more powerful than any biological system, because they will be able to communicate and transfer information in a completely different way than we humans do.
I think what you say here is something very, very interesting, in the sense that a lot of times when we build systems, we think of it from a human perspective, like how would humans do this?
Yeah.
But what you're saying is like digital systems and robots don't have the limitations of humans, so we should build and design them very differently. If we can imagine.
If we can imagine, but we will not be able to do that, because I think that the evolution gave us the bodies we have, and then everything around us has been adapted to our bodies, how we sit, how we eat, how we drink.
Yeah.
And of course, now, if you would like to deploy something that looks completely different as an octopus and so on, it wouldn't drink the same way, it wouldn't, But that doesn't mean that through simulation, through testing, through execution, you will not be able to find something that is potentially more powerful than the human body. I think we already see this in a certain way, right? Because there are so many areas now we could kind of like discuss about. But for example, if you think of the amputees that get intelligent prosthetics, that is potentially more powerful than what they had before, or gave them, flexibility to jump like 3 meters, like you couldn't do that with your legs. So we already have systems where we integrate human body with intelligent technology and improve or augment human capabilities. And you retrain your brain to do something else with a new body. So the brain learns something new. And I think that that's important. From one point of view, we will have humans being augmented for various reasons, either by choice or by need. That can be from the sensory point of view, that you have more sensors, that you can all of a sudden measure distance because you have laser or LiDAR or whatever. And that will affect also how the brain continues to develop. We won't see the difference during any of our time, but at some point we will. So that's one thing. How do the fact that you change and exchange your body affect the development of the human brain per se? Physically, but then cognitively. I mean, I don't want to go back to the Matrix movie or anything like that, but it will look a little bit like that, or a variation of that. How fast you can acquire knowledge and train the brain, basically, to do something. And so that's one thing. It will be augmented human. And this is why, in one way or another, honestly, I'm not afraid of AI taking over. It will be something else. It will be maybe an integrated human in different ways. Not for a long time, but at some point, it will be like that. So I don't believe that there will be, AI and the human as is, and then robots. It will be a mix.
Human plus machines.
Yes.
Well, I know in the hardware space of AI, a lot of the challenges that people are trying to solve are created by humans in the first place. So, I mean, you mentioned before the robot vacuum cleaners, right? And, I've gone back to the manual, like Dyson vacuum cleaner, because I have chairs, a lot of toys and so on that the
like
robot one cannot.
any family with kids. Yeah.
And I've been thinking, like, why didn't we design the apartment in such a way that I just push a button and everything goes up like 50 centimeters so the robot can vacuum?
Yeah.
Like, why don't we attach things to the wall? I mean, it's a silly thought.
Yeah.
But the reason why the vacuum cleaner cannot vacuum is because of everything we put there in place, right? Do you think we will have a society going forward that is designed more for robots than just humans?
We actually believed that back in 90s that would be the case. So when we didn't have the same algorithms that we have today in terms of, robot localizing itself, finding its place in the where it is in the house and which room, we believe that people would be putting like a how do you call them, like the QR code or something like that, that the robot would recognize, and it would say, okay, I'm in this room now because it's this QR code and stuff like that. Even that was not acceptable. Why would I have a QR code somewhere on the wall But I think today I wouldn't have a problem with it. I think if there was a value in having a QR code, like a picture or something like that, so that the robot can localize, I think I can accept that. So I think that when you see that there is a use of the technology that somehow eases whatever you don't need to do, I think that we tend to accept it a little bit more in a way. But it needs to come to a level where it's cheap enough and blah, blah, blah. So,
and you see the impact.
You see the impact. But I think that, as you say, we also learn from each other. And I think that that's another important aspect to have that has a close relation to AI. We learn from our parents. We go to store and we buy the furniture that is there to be bought. We maybe have a budget, so you can't do your floors that way, right? Because you also, that would have costed.
And I don't have the skills.
Or the skills or whatever. So I'm just, there might be many reasons.
Yeah.
So we have a certain culture, we have a certain way of thinking that, well, for babies, they need space and they need all these toys. They probably don't. But, so we continue to live a little bit better, but life of our parents, and they lived the life of their parents. So you have all this kind of things that come with you. But then maybe if AI comes and tells you, okay, this would be the optimal way for you, and this would be the cost, but it's going to be very different, and it's going to also require from you living your life differently.
Yeah.
You will need to make that intelligent choice. Are you kind of like willing to sacrifice something for achieving something else or introducing? Like, where am I coming with this? If you think about reinforcement learning, finding the strategies of playing games that humans haven't. Why not? Well, because you learn how to play chess or Go from your teachers. And they had a strategy. They teach you. You are taught how to play tennis or whatever kind of like sports. There are small variations between generations, but not too much. It's not that I'm going to live my life completely differently. I'm going to, move out from my parents when I'm 5 just as an experiment. And I'm not going to go to doggies. I mean, things like that.
Right.
You can do that in simulation. It's a huge social experiment and nobody will do it, but still. Anyway, that's how reinforcement learning basically works. You give it a space and you say, okay, go and explore freely.
No instructions.
No instructions. And then you come up maybe with something new. You will come up with lots of crap too. Sorry for the expression. But you might find a strategy that nobody else have ever thought about.
But that's actually very true. Like when people claim that AI does not generate new knowledge, I think in reinforcement learning, especially in games, you have a lot of new, like, it's a new way of playing chess.
Yeah.
It's a new way of playing Go or
just
different
imagine
games.
now having a model of the whole world.
Yeah.
And playing it, playing scenarios.
Yeah.
And there are people out there. There are people that would like to make a digital twin of the world.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say who that is, but it's somebody that everybody knows by name at least. So. And somebody that has access to infrastructure that can do that.
I actually talked to that person about that thing.
Okay, good. So he's very much about that.
For climate change reasons, right?
Okay.
Everyone is talking about climate change and this will impact...
that, okay, yeah.
Why not just simulate it?
Exactly.
But
there might be very many different reasons why you would like to do that.
But it's a stock-listed company,
a
big one. So
we won't talk about it. But anyway, I think that's something that might be also for the future for all of us. Like just to have not me telling you, well, if you do that, then that will happen. Because you and me have a relationship in certain way. You might accept my prediction because you respect me, or just hate it because you don't respect me, or whatever. But if there is an objective system, okay, we can talk about that, but that has access to much more experience, much more information, and tells you, well, these are the potential 5 scenarios.
Yeah.
Will you be able to accept it better than you do a human kind of like prediction? That's something for all of us to think about.
That would be crazy if you can simulate the world. I mean, the things we've discussed in terms of education system. I mean, you can just simulate how should people educate themselves. Will you get an answer?
I think it's very difficult. I mean, we have been talking about causality. We have been talking about like the butterfly effect, whatever theory and things like that. And I think that the world is complex.
Yeah.
You will never be able to, I'm now saying never, but there's so many parameters. And I think that it's kind of like the small scale versus large scale. Will you be able to simulate that ever? Like the human aspect.
Right.
Or do you just want to look into the physical aspect of the world, when it blows here and then the Gulf Stream and all of those things? Yeah, I mean, it's about the scale. And I think that this with education and with the social aspect, you would also need to kind of take into account how the human changes. It's just too complicated, I think.
But at some scale.
At some scale, you will be able to do really crazy stuff.
I want to go back to the visual language model and the tactile language models. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
And the smell language model, all of that.
I just let it slide to marinate a bit, but can you say a few
I
words?
think so. It's about really being able to ground your senses in meanings.
Yeah.
How something smells, how something tastes, how something sounds, and relations between all of your senses. Why it's sometimes a certain smell generating a certain memory or a certain image that calms you down or just stresses you and you don't necessarily always know that and stuff like that. And I think that immersing people in environments where by stimulating our senses, we maybe understand our reactions more. I think that will be very interesting, I think, from several different perspectives of also like for the health and well-being sector and so on. So you and me sitting in this room, would this conversation be as easy and calm if there was like a rotating disco light here, or, you know, we had basically some form of a smell that none of us like being generated? How does my decision making in my mind works when my senses are stimulated in a way that is a little bit unexpected? And I think that that's going to be interesting to see how the science of that continues. So if I'm massaged by the chair while we are speaking,
You might have revealed the name of the person.
Yeah,
Precisely.
That you. Who knows? Who knows? Maybe that could have been exactly the outcome. And this is what interests me: how we act and react in different situations when there are things that are known and there are things that are unknown, things that we cannot communicate, things that we cannot feel. And this is why I say that we will have this type of models that will then take and help us to understand our own actions and reactions to things. But it needs to, for the human, it needs to be grounded in all our senses. It's not enough to just stimulate your audio and video and you think that it's enough. There is a lot of things in terms of like if your clothes doesn't fit and it itches somewhere,
right?
How you perform and how focused you are. And I think that, you know, when we talk about people with disabilities, maybe they just shouldn't have very tight jeans on them. Or maybe they should. Maybe this is exactly what somebody with ASD actually needs. And I think that these are the things that interest me, things that are almost around the corner, but really not.
So that's some
Next
things
step.
You're researching on right now.
We'll look into smell.
Yeah.
Something they just started, a big European grant financed by the European Research, an ERC grant, as we say. And it's with 3 other partners, people in chemistry that do chemical assessment of smell molecules, people that do psychology of smell here at Karolinska, and then people that are doing various types of neuroscientific studies of how smell is acquired in humans. So you have the chemistry, pure smell, no humans, but just pure smell. You have the psychology. How does the fact that we have or don't have the smell affect us? And we know that during COVID, lots of people lost the sense of smell, and that affects also their experience of food.
Right.
And then you need lots of neuropsychological studies in terms of if you look into something and it looks like, poop, but it smells daffodils. What does that do with your brain?
Right.
I mean, and what does that do with your decision making? So imagine yourself being in a very difficult situation, potentially somebody dying, or I don't know. It's visually difficult, but it smells so good.
Right.
I mean, it's a scary movie.
Yeah.
Because you just don't know what you will focus on the visual that scares you, or on the olfactory that smells so good.
Right.
Like freshly baked bread or something like that. So this is what we are looking into right now. What are the smells people associate with something positive? What are the smells that people associate with something negative? How can we build experiments where we immerse people in environments that look a certain way but smell just very odd? Or vice versa. What does that make with people's ability to focus?
Wow.
I think it's cool.
I think it's really cool.
We have 6 years to kind of like do really cool stuff. And it's still, it's not like that you destroy somebody's, like, it's not kind of, what do you say, invasive or anything like that. Maybe it is. I don't know psychologically, but these are the things I really burn for. Always something, find something else.
Yeah. And it's very cross-disciplinary.
It's very multidisciplinary or cross-disciplinary, absolutely.
So I imagine you use a lot of LLMs to understand each other's
Not yet, I have to say, but there is now a large language models that is trained on molecular description. You know how molecules look, CH3, CH, CO, C, whatever. So what you want to do is to train a large language model that goes from molecular structure to attributes, like this smells warm, like summer, so that you can understand, if you take a sample of something, how people would rate it or grade it, or vice versa. You actually want to generate with a generative model and Gen AI that we haven't actually mentioned even once during the full hour. Gen AI, now it's coming for the smell. You want to generate a chemical structure of something that you say, okay, I now want to smell a 7 a.m. morning, or for what reason you would like to do that, of a New York subway at the 52nd Street or something like that. And then bloop, your laptop or your phone generates it. And you close your eyes and you are just there for a second.
Yeah.
Immersed in that kind of like environment, because maybe that makes you happy for some reason.
Yeah.
It's still a long way, but we are getting there.
That's very cool. And I know we talked about that in the beginning, but you have this, one foot in business, one foot in research, and it's very steady, grip in both areas, right? It's quite unusual in Sweden, in particular, to have this kind of, presence in both areas. When I did my PhD, I felt a bit like it was frowned upon to be commercial and talk business when you do research. It should be pure research. If you go private sector, that's the dark side. Very different from the US, as you said in the beginning. Like in the US, you have these superstar professors, both in terms of teaching, but also because of their impact in industry, right?
Yeah.
And Andrew Ng, one of our superstar AI researchers, he recently joined the boards of directors of Amazon. What's your take on this? Do you agree that there is this difference?
The world changes. The young generation changes. What they see as role models changes. And I think that we need to change, all of us. And we need to change the culture of putting people in a certain silo, and then they should be kind of like quiet and stand there.
Yeah.
I think what's good in Sweden is that we actually have a couple of fantastic old industrial people or older experienced industrial people that see that. And it's exactly those people that gave me the opportunity to be a part of this different world. So I'm very thankful for those that did that and that see that you need people with different expertise. So before entering the board of FAM, I think it was, I asked the chairman, why me? And then he said, because you think differently, and I will never forget that. So I'm really thankful to him that he said that, because it was so simple and so clear to me. Yeah, I do think differently, and different is not always considered as good, right? Because you don't know where you have people. But I think you need to be open, and in order to be open, you also need to be very self-certain. Right. There are many things you need, that skills, in order to be able to breed the next generation of people that are different. And there are a couple of people in Sweden, I think, that at the right places that see that and understand that. And it has been a little bit of luck.
But now you're driving that.
And I will drive that for everybody that comes after me. I look into already from day one when I recruit PhD students, what can I do with this person? How can I help this person not to end up to be like you? Say that from the beginning, or having the experience you had. You cannot do corporate. You can do anything, but you need to have the knowledge.
Right.
And you need to have the knowledge of the sectors you want to be involved in, and you need to have an excellent knowledge of yourself. And I think that that's important. And when you have that, then it's much, much easier to kind of like pave your own way.
And, the rate of adoption of AI and so on we've talked about varies, right? And many times it comes top down. Someone in the board or in the C-level, they're like, we need to use AI. And many times these people don't fully understand and use AI themselves.
Yeah.
Where would you start a change within a company? I mean, you sit in the boards of these companies. Do you think it needs to come from the top, that they need to walk the talk of using AI, or how would you go about?
There are many ways, right? I think it needs to come both top down and bottom up. That's the conclusion I have. It can't just come from one direction, but it will come in different flavors. If you hear the CEO speaking about this, even if you know that he doesn't know what he actually means, it's still okay, right? Because the direction for the company and for the business needs to be set. And you need to also say that, well, I'm saying that we are going to do AI and Gen AI, which means that there will be investments and there will be okays, right? That needs to come from the absolute top.
So you have the buy-in.
Precisely. And then you need to have, of course, the competence at the bottom. And you will need to have the competence that can actually see the potential. But that you need to, at the absolute lowest level, you need to work very hardly with everybody in between to give the right mandate to the people that know what to do it.
Right.
And that's a difficult thing. So it's the from the top saying it's okay, this is what we are doing, but then having all other levels really implementing this. It's not easy, but I think it needs to come at all levels, inside out and forever. Yeah, not only bottom up or top down, but also inside out and outside in.
You usually have, in larger enterprises, quite a lot of politics, right? Where there is resistance for change and so on, and the right people for the task might not get the enablement they need to carry out those tasks. Have you seen that?
Yes, all the time. Because in many businesses, you would like to continue to work with people you trust, and you would like to continue to work with people that understand and know what the values of your business are. And that's a problem. That's a huge problem. Because then you just change the function of somebody and, okay, this person worked well as a head of this, and this person will now work well as a head of that. A huge mistake. Because people don't have the competence.
Right.
And I think that lots of the problems that are currently occurring in many businesses is like building that trust, learning how to build the trust, making sure that when people are onboarded, you spend 3 times as much maybe time on onboarding so that you actually see and assess whether they will be able to accept the values, whether they will change the values in the right way, whether they will be able to integrate and so on. So even the onboarding process needs to be retaught.
So people choose people they trust over the skills sometimes.
Yes.
And you need kind of both to achieve something.
Yeah.
And that's where the onboarding comes in.
I don't know what to call it. Is it onboarding? Is it mentoring? Is it continuous assessment of people performance? We choose whatever label you want. that the one that is like sounding most or least negative. But I think that this is an important thing, that we still have kind of like certain social aspects of somebody, you know, being at that level, not kind of like going to that level. But this is really interesting because this is happening in academia all the time. I mean, I have been like the dean or vice dean of the school for 8 years. And you're at the level where you're kind of like heading all professors and all the kind of like the money, the budgeting and blah, blah, blah. And then after 6 years, you go back. You're just a professor, and a person that kind of like maybe felt for 6 years mistreated by you is now your boss.
Right.
That happens in academia all the time. How often does it happen in companies? That somebody that used to be your boss is now somebody that you're boss over? It doesn't happen so very often. And I think maybe that's the training we need. Maybe, but it's not easy, you know, it's not it's not easy to implement all these things that we all the time rotate and have different, But I think that this is currently one of the biggest, I would say, aspects, finding the right people, putting them to the right level, giving them the right mandate, and continuing to do that in a very kind of like trustful and value chain or value whatever kind of that you want for your company.
I think we're heading towards
some end of something.
Exactly. And I always want to end with the question, and maybe we have gotten some glimpse into that already. Mm-hmm. But what are you the most excited about for the future?
Big things and simple things, I usually say. I would still like to have access to something that really cleans our homes, but everything, the dust,
we can
the clothing.
We can do that floor thing.
The floor thing, everything. That would be fantastic. Just coming home now, my mom is visiting, you know, and when I enter, I see that she has done the floors, and I'm like happy. But it's still a human doing that manually, and not many would want to clean in my home, but my mom does it. Scientifically, and I think when it comes to the technology and so on, I think we need to have a period of where we ensure that we don't lose competence that humans have. And this scares me a little bit right now, that people see the potential of the technology being used and that they think that they don't need to actually learn things because the technology does it instead of them. I'm shit scared, sorry for the expression, but that they will have 1, 2, maybe even 3 generations of engineers with no knowledge at all.
Right.
So that scares me most. I should also say something positive about the future, but then...
Cleaning your home.
If everybody, precisely, cleaning my home, but if everybody now sees this and has that fear, then I hope that large corporations building the systems that people are using right now will think of this and come up with ways of having this educational aspect integrated in the system so that they, in the way we prompt systems, we are prompted by the systems back so that we ensure that we continue to learn. So prompting humans, not prompting LLMs.
Two-sided prompting.
Just imagine that. That's another thing that nobody has come up with. But that's,
So much more to bidirectionality. Right now,
Absolutely.
We're telling the LLMs what we want them to do, but they rarely ask for feedback.
Yeah.
Right? When there is ambiguity in a prompt, they just go ahead and take the best guess instead of asking for clarifications.
Precisely. And also challenging humans.
Yeah.
And we accepting that we are challenged by the humans. So maybe that's on the educational system. There is no such thing as free lunch. what does that mean in the era of LLMs, right? You can't just get answers. You need to give something back. You need to show to the system that you are worthy of getting that answer. So accepting that you're I know that this is horrible, but this is what I think we need. I'm sorry to say. And maybe we just need to train our kids of how, like, you just can't get everything the right moment, the right way, like when you ask for it, but you need to give something back.
It's going to train us to be much more patient.
Hopefully. And maybe that's what we need.
Yeah. Dani, thank you so much for sharing so generously all of your knowledge and insights. I know a lot of listeners will appreciate this.
Thank you so much. Well, and we'll forget about all the crazy stuff I have said, but that's me.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah.